Welcome to episode 134 of Gods and Heroes of Ancient Greece. My name is MyLinda Butterworth, and today we continue with the tale of Odysseus and the story of the Suitors Plot. When Telemachus was away in Pylos and Sparta, the suitors on the island of Ithaca in the palace of Odysseus continued their bouts and amused themselves with throwing discus and the spear. One day, when Antinous and Eurymachus, the strongest and handsomest among them, were sitting a little apart from the rest, Medon, son of Phronius, went up to them and said, "Do you know when Telemachus is expected back from Pylos? The ship on which he is making his journey is mine. I lent it to him, but now I need it myself to sell to Euyclea. I keep mares there for breeding, and I want to fetch a colt to tame it and train it." The suitors were surprised, for they did not even know that Telemachus had left. They thought he had retired to his property in the country, where he had herds of goats and swine. Now they jumped at the conclusion that he had forced Medon to give him his ship, but the man denied this. "I gave it to him of my own free will," he said. "Who would refuse an act of friendship to one who was in trouble? That would have been unfeeling and harsh. Besides, he was accompanied by noble youths, and Mentor went with them as their guide. Or was it perhaps a god in the guise of Mentor? For now that I come to think of it, I saw Mentor himself here only yesterday." So saying, Medon left the suitors and went back to his father's house. But Antinous and Eurymachus were astonished and vexed at this unexpected news. They rose and joined the others, who were seated in a circle, resting from their games. Seething with anger, Antinous cried to them with flashing eyes, "This Telemachus has gone on his quest. He has undertaken the journey we refuse to believe in. May Zeus destroy him before he does us any harm. Give me a swift sailing boat, friends with 20 oarsmen, and I shall lie in wait for him in the strait between Ithaca and Same, so that his voyage of exploration may end in death." All acclaimed his plan and promised to get him everything he required. Then the suitors withdrew into the palace. But there was one who spied on the council they held there. It was Medon, the herald, who hated the shameless suitors, even though he performed services for them. He had stood outside, but close enough to hear every word they said, and now he hurried to Penelope to report their plot to the queen. Her knees shook as she listened. For a long time she was speechless with distress. Her breath failed her. Her eyes filled with tears. "Oh, why did my son have to go?" she burst out at last. "Is it not enough that his father has perished? Shall the name of our house be blotted from the earth?" And when Medon could give her no explanation, she sank weeping on the threshold of her chamber, and her handmaids lamented with her. "Why did he go without telling me?" cried Penelope. "I would have advised him against this journey. Call Delaus, my old servant, and tell him to go to Laertes and give him this sad news. Perhaps that old and experienced man will think of something we can do." Then Euyclea, the old serving woman, opened her lips and said, "I shall not hide it from you any longer, my queen, even if you kill me for keeping silence up to now. I knew of his going. I myself gave him everything he needed for his voyage. He made me swear not to tell before the 12th day, unless you yourself noticed his absence. But now I advise you to bathe and adorn yourself, and to pray for protection for your son at the altar of Athene, daughter of Zeus." Penelope did as the old woman had counseled. When she had pleaded for the safety of Telemachus in solemn prayers, she lay down to sleep. And in a dream, Athene sent her Euyclea, her sister, the wife of the hero Eumelus. Euyclea comforted her and promised her that her son would return. "Be of good courage," she said. "Your son has a guide whom all other men would envy him. Pallas Athene herself goes at his side. She will protect him against the suitors. It is she who has sent me to you in your dream." So said the vision, and vanished through the bolted door, and Penelope woke from her sleep, filled with courage and gladness. Meantime, the suitors had prepared their ship, and Antinous boarded it with 20 sturdy oarsmen. A rocky island with many jutting cliffs lay in the middle of the strait which separated Ithaca and Same. Toward this island the suitors steered and waited for Telemachus, hidden from sight in an inlet. And here is where I end my tale for today. But I'll be back with more tales. Many more tales. Until then, my friends, enjoy the journey.